They stopped him in front of everyone. Not quietly, not politely. Right there, under the harsh white lights of Chicago O'Hare, with a full boarding line watching. "Sir, step back. You don't belong in this lane." The words cut through the terminal like a blade. Conversations died mid-sentence. Rolling suitcases slowed. A baby stopped crying. For a split second, the entire gate froze, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Ethan Brooks didn't move. He stood on the blue-carpeted priority lane, tall, still, his duffel bag hanging from one shoulder. Grey hoodie, dark joggers, running shoes with creases at the toe. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed money. Nothing that begged for respect. Behind the podium, Melissa Carter straightened her spine. 38 years old, 15 years with the airline. Her uniform was crisp, pressed sharp enough to feel like armor. Her hair was pulled tight into a bun that hadn't shifted all morning. Acrylic nails rested on the scanner like claws, tapping once. Tap, tap, tap. She looked Ethan up and down, not at his face first, at his shoes, then his pants, then the hoodie. Her jaw tightened. "Economy boarding hasn't started," she said, voice smooth on the surface, brittle underneath. "You'll need to wait over there." She pointed. Not with her whole hand. Just one finger. Casual. Dismissive. Ethan blinked once. Slowly. "I'm first class," he said. His voice was calm, deep, a little rough, like he hadn't slept much. No anger in it. No challenge. Just a statement of fact. Melissa laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't warm. It was a sharp, single sound that escaped before she could stop it. The kind of laugh people make when they think something is absurd and beneath them. She didn't reach for the scanner. She didn't ask for the boarding pass. She already knew. "Sir," she said, leaning forward slightly now, lowering her voice as if explaining something obvious to a child. "This lane is for verified priority passengers. First class, diamond status, military in uniform." Her eyes flicked back to the hoodie, and people who actually paid for it. A ripple moved through the line behind Ethan. Someone shifted their weight. A man cleared his throat. Somewhere to the left, a phone camera quietly rose. Ethan felt it. The attention. The heat. He reached into his pocket anyway. The motion was slow, deliberate, careful not to startle anyone. His phone came out, screen already lit. He turned it toward her. Seat 1A. First class. His name clean and clear. "Just scan it," he said. Melissa didn't look. She shook her head, already annoyed, already done. "We've had issues with fake mobile passes all week," she said. Screenshots, stolen accounts, people trying their luck. She looked past him now, her smile snapping into place as a well-dressed older couple stepped up behind him. The man wore a beige trench coat. The woman had a silk scarf draped perfectly around her neck. They looked like the kind of people airlines used in commercials. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitman," Melissa said brightly. "So good to see you again." She gestured around Ethan as if he were furniture. "Come right through." Ethan didn't move. He stepped half an inch closer to the podium, Not aggressive, just present. A wall, solid, unignorable. "Scan the ticket," he said again. This time, the smile slid off Melissa's face. Her cheeks flushed. A vein at her temple pulsed once. She straightened, squaring her shoulders, reclaiming the space behind the podium like a throne. "Sir," she said sharply, "you are blocking the priority lane. That is a federal boarding area." The word federal landed heavy. Deliberate, loaded. "You are disrupting premium customers," she continued. "If you do not step aside immediately, I will deny you boarding." People were watching openly now. No pretending, no subtle glances. The tension had weight. It pressed against chests. Ethan felt it tighten in his ribs. He thought, briefly, about how easily this could go wrong. One wrong word. One wrong move. A narrative written without him. He kept his hands visible. Relaxed. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Melissa's eyes flared. "Are you threatening me?" she snapped, loud enough for the Whitmans to hear, for the line to hear, for the cameras to hear. She took a step back, one hand flying to her chest in a performance so sudden it almost looked rehearsed. "Security," she called out. "Security, please." The word echoed. Two officers near the food court looked up. One sighed. The other adjusted his belt. They started walking over. The air shifted, thickened. Someone behind Ethan muttered, "He didn't do anything." Melissa shot them a glare that could peel paint. Ethan didn't turn around. He stared at the scanner, at the red light that would turn green with one simple action. One beep that could end all of this. He knew exactly who he was. He knew what his name carried in boardrooms. He knew what contracts were waiting on his signature in New York. He knew the number of people whose jobs depended on meetings he was supposed to attend the next morning. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, to Melissa Carter, he was just another man in a hoodie who dared to stand where she believed he didn't belong. The officers were closer now, shoes squeaking softly on tile, radios crackling. Melissa lifted her chin, emboldened, protected. "Sir," she said, voice trembling with authority and adrenaline, "this is your final warning." Ethan exhaled, slow, controlled. Somewhere deep inside him, a familiar, bitter thought surfaced. Not again. And that was when he decided, if they wanted a scene, they were going to get one. Just not the one they were expecting. The first officer reached the podium before the second one did. He was broad-shouldered, mid-40s, with a shaved head and a face that looked permanently tired. His badge read, "Daniel Moore." He stopped a few feet from Ethan, eyes moving fast. Shoes, hands, posture. The subtle checklist of a man trained to assess risk in seconds. "What's going on here?" Moore asked. Melissa answered, before Ethan could open his mouth. "He's refusing to leave the priority lane," she said, breathless, as if she'd been running. "He claims he's first class, but his pass is fraudulent. He became confrontational when I asked him to step aside." The word confrontational hung there, ugly and vague. Moore looked at Ethan. Not aggressively. Not kindly, either. Neutral. Procedural. "Sir," Moore said, "I need you to step away from the podium." Ethan didn't move. "I have a valid ticket," he said. All she has to do is scan it. He held his phone out again, this time toward Moore. Moore glanced at the screen. Just a glance. Long enough to register the Airline logo. The name. The seat. It looked clean. Real. Moore frowned slightly and turned his head toward Melissa. Did you scan it? Melissa stiffened. I told you, she snapped. We've had multiple incidents with screenshots this week. And look at him. Does he look like someone who drops $4,000 on a seat? There it was. The line that changed the temperature of the air. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Someone sucked in a breath. Somewhere, a phone camera zoomed tighter. Ethan felt it land in his chest, heavy and familiar. Not the insult itself, the confidence behind it, the certainty. Moore's jaw tightened. Ma'am, he said carefully, I still need to verify. That's procedure. Melissa crossed her arms, her nails dug into her sleeves. I am the gate lead, she said. I'm denying boarding. He's a security risk now. The word security hit harder than confrontational. The second officer, Luis Ramirez, arrived beside Moore. Younger, leaner. His eyes moved from Ethan to Melissa to the growing crowd. He noticed the phones immediately. Sir, Ramirez said to Ethan, can you step back with us while we sort this out? Ethan shook his head once. This flight leaves in 20 minutes, he said. If I step away, I miss it. And that costs more than a seat. Melissa scoffed. Loud. Sharp. Oh, listen to him, she said. Now he's a businessman. Ethan looked at her then. Really looked. He saw the fear beneath the bravado, the way her fingers trembled just slightly against her arms, the way she kept glancing at the Whitmans as if drawing strength from their approval. He lowered his voice. You're escalating something you don't need to, he said. You can still fix this. Melissa leaned forward, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Clean. Sharp. You don't scare me, she whispered. Men like you always think they do. Ramirez's eyes flicked between them. He took a half step closer to Ethan. Sir, he said, if the airline denies boarding, we have to escort you to ticketing. The crowd shifted. A woman near the back spoke up. He didn't do anything. Her voice shook, but it carried. Melissa snapped her head around. Stay out of it. Moore rubbed a hand over his face. Melissa, he said quietly, just scan the pass. For a moment, it looked like she might. Her hand hovered over the scanner. 1 inch. 2. Then she pulled back. No, she said. I want him removed. The word removed dropped like a gavel. Moore closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, something had changed. Not anger. Resignation. Sir, he said to Ethan, I'm asking you to come with us. Ethan felt the walls closing in. Not physically, systemically. He imagined the headline, the clip without context, the narrative already forming. Disruptive passenger removed from first class. He took a slow breath. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not until someone with actual authority looks at that screen. Melissa smiled. It was small, tight, victorious. "That won't be happening," she said. "You don't have friends here." That was when Ethan reached into his pocket again. Every muscle in Moore's body tensed. "Hands visible," Ramirez said sharply. Ethan stopped, held his hands up. "Calm. I'm calling someone," he said. "That's all." Melissa laughed again, louder this time. "Go ahead," she said. "Call whoever you want." Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolled past dozens of contacts without looking, names that ran companies, names that moved markets. He stopped on one. Jonathan Reed. The phone rang. Once, twice, but all. Melissa turned away, already waving the Whitmans through the scanner. "So sorry for the delay," she said sweetly. "Some people just don't understand boundaries." The Whitmans avoided Ethan's eyes as they passed. The call connected. "Ethan," a voice said, warm, familiar. "I didn't expect to hear from you today." Ethan watched Melissa bark at a young mother struggling with a stroller. He watched Moore shift his weight, uncomfortable. He watched Ramirez scan the crowd, aware this was slipping. "I need you," Ethan said into the phone. "Right now." There was a pause, a different kind. "Where are you?" Jonathan asked. "O'Hare," Ethan said. "Gate K12. And your gate lead has decided I don't belong." Silence. Then sharp. Controlled. "What's her name?" Ethan looked at Melissa's badge. Melissa Carter. Another pause, shorter this time. "Don't move," Jonathan said. "I'm in Terminal 4. I'll be there in 2 minutes." Ethan ended the call. Melissa noticed him watching her. She stalked over, face inches from his. "I told you to leave," she hissed. "Why are you still here?" "Waiting," Ethan said. "For what?" she demanded. "For the person who actually runs this place." Melissa snorted. "You think you're clever," she said. "You think name-dropping will save you." She turned to Moore. "Get him out of my gate." Moore hesitated. That hesitation lasted exactly 1 second. Then the sound came from behind them. Footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. Not rushed, not frantic. Controlled. Heavy with authority. The crowd parted instinctively, like water around a prow. Melissa didn't see it yet. She was too busy staring at Ethan, her face flushed, her power peaking. "You are nothing," she said, "and you're about to learn that." Ethan's eyes moved past her, over her shoulder. He saw the suits first. Navy. Tailored. Sharp. Faces set. And at the center of them, walking with long, decisive strides, was Jonathan Reed. Ethan said nothing. He just smiled, very slightly, and said, "Melissa, you might want to turn around." Melissa didn't turn around. She rolled her eyes instead, the way people do when they believe they are still in control. "I'm not falling for that," she said. "There's nothing behind me that changes what's happening." The footsteps stopped. The air shifted again. Sharper this time, like a pressure drop before turbulence. A voice cut through the gate, low and unmistakably calm. Melissa Carter. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The authority in it was absolute. Melissa froze. Her shoulders stiffened first, Then her hand slid off the podium as if it had suddenly burned her. Slowly, almost mechanically, she turned. Jonathan Reed stood 3 feet away. 55 years old, silver hair cut close, navy suit that looked like it had been tailored on his body, not for it. No tie. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was controlled, surgical. The kind of calm that comes from people who are used to ending careers with a sentence. Behind him stood 2 senior executives and the terminal director. They weren't looking at Melissa. They were looking at Ethan. Jonathan's eyes locked onto Ethan's immediately. He stepped around Melissa without acknowledging her existence and extended his hand. "Ethan," he said, "I am very sorry." The gate went silent. No phones moved. No one whispered. Even the scanner seemed louder now, humming faintly under the weight of what had just happened. Ethan shook his hand. Firm, steady. "Nice airline you're running," Ethan said quietly. Jonathan winced, just slightly. "We'll talk." Melissa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Mr. Reed," she stammered, forcing a smile that cracked at the edges. "I had no idea you were here today. I was just handling a security issue." Jonathan didn't look at her. "What issue?" he asked, eyes still on Ethan. Melissa corrected herself quickly. "He was refusing to follow protocol. Blocking first-class boarding. I was protecting our premium customers." Jonathan finally turned his head. He looked at Melissa the way a scientist looks at a failed experiment. Curious, detached, cold. "Is that so?" he said. He glanced at Officer Moore. "Did you see the ticket?" Moore swallowed. "Yes, sir." It appeared valid. Jonathan nodded once. "Did anyone scan it?" Melissa's breath caught. "The system was locked," she said quickly. "I couldn't access the manifest." Jonathan stepped past her and leaned over the podium. His fingers moved fast across the keyboard. 3 keys. A soft beep. The screen lit up. Unlocked. He didn't raise his voice. "The system is not locked," he said. "It never was." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Melissa's face drained of color. Jonathan lifted Ethan's phone from his hand. "May I?" Ethan nodded. Jonathan placed it under the scanner. Beep. The light turned green. The screen filled with information. Name. Seat. Status. And then the tag at the bottom. Red. Impossible to miss. Board member. Strategic partner. Melissa stared at it. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Jonathan turned the screen slightly so she could see it clearly. "Do you know who Ethan Brooks is?" he asked. She shook her head, tears pooling now. "No, sir. I didn't know." "That," Ethan said calmly, stepping closer, "is exactly the problem." Jonathan continued, his voice steady, precise. "Ethan Brooks founded Brooks Aerospace. He helped design the fuel intake system on the aircraft parked outside this gate. He is also the managing partner of Horizon Logistics." The words landed one by one. "Sovereign Air," Jonathan said, is finalizing a $300 million cargo contract with Horizon Logistics. Ethan is the one who signs it. Melissa's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the podium, fingers white. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear I didn't know." Jonathan's gaze hardened. "You didn't know who he was," he said. "So you decided who he was." Silence. Ethan leaned forward, resting his hands on the podium. His voice was low now, intimate, dangerous. "You didn't scan my ticket because you didn't like how I looked," he said. "You didn't check the manifest because you didn't think I was worth the effort. If I'd been wearing a suit, this never happens." Jonathan nodded once. "True character," Ethan continued, "isn't how you treat the CEO." He glanced at Jonathan briefly. "It's how you treat the person you think can't hurt you." A murmur of agreement rolled through the gate. Someone clapped once, then stopped. Jonathan turned to the terminal director. "Remove her badge." Melissa looked up, eyes wide. "Please, I've worked here 15 years. I have a mortgage." Jonathan's voice didn't change. "Officer." Moore stepped forward, gently, professionally. He reached for her badge. "Wait," Ethan said. Jonathan paused. Ethan checked his watch. "This flight leaves in 10 minutes. If we delay boarding for termination paperwork, these people miss their connections." He gestured to the crowd. "I don't want that." Melissa looked at him, hope flickering. "Let her stay," Ethan said. Jonathan exhaled. "Ethan, you don't have to. I'm not finished," Ethan said. He turned back to Melissa. "She doesn't get to run this gate," he continued. "If she thinks she's too good to scan a ticket, she can help where no one sees her." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Then he smiled. "Just a little." "Ramp duty," he said. Melissa's head snapped up. "What? You'll be loading bags," Jonathan said. "Outside, until this plane pushes back." The wind howled faintly through the glass. Snow flurried against the windows. Melissa looked at her manicured nails. "But my hands move," Jonathan said. She scrambled. Minutes later, Ethan walked down the jet bridge. Not rushed, not triumphant, just quiet. Inside the cabin, the lights were soft. Calm. A different world. Jonathan took the seat across from him. "You didn't have to be that measured," Jonathan said. Ethan looked out the window. "She was ready to ruin my life," he said. "I just let her see the weight of her choices." Outside, on the tarmac, a figure in a fluorescent vest struggled with a suitcase. Ethan watched. The engines began to hum, and the lesson was already airborne. The jet bridge door sealed with a dull thud, and the world outside softened into glass and distance. Inside first class, the cabin breathed. Low light, clean leather. The muted scent of coffee and something floral. Ethan took his seat by the window, stowed his duffel beneath the ottoman, and rested his forearms on his knees. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a man who had survived a storm without raising his voice. Jonathan Reed sat across the aisle, shoulders finally dropping as the adrenaline bled out of him. He loosened his collar, accepted a glass of water from a flight attendant whose smile was too careful, too reverent. "Word will travel fast," Jonathan said quietly. "It always does." Ethan didn't answer right away. He pressed the window control and dimmed the glass halfway, enough to blur the tarmac without erasing it. Below, the ground crew moved with practiced urgency. Carts rattled. A conveyor belt whined. Wind skated across concrete. And there she was. Melissa Carter stood at the belly of the plane in a vest 2 sizes too big, fluorescent and unforgiving. Her bun had come loose. Strands of hair clung to her cheeks. She reached for a hard shell suitcase, pink and scuffed, the handles slick with sleet. She pulled. It didn't budge. She tried again, bracing her foot, shoulders trembling with effort. Ethan watched her slip. Not dramatically. Not enough to draw cheers. Just a sharp loss of balance. Her knee hit first. The suitcase slid, struck her shin, and dropped with a hollow crack that echoed up through the fuselage. She sucked in a breath, soundless from this height, and stayed down for a second too long. Jonathan followed Ethan's gaze. He winced. "She's never worked the ramp," he said. "Ticketing to gate supervision. Skipped the hard parts." Ethan nodded once. "It shows." The engines began their low spool, a rising whine that vibrated through the floor and into bone. The plane felt alive now, awake, ready. A flight attendant approached again, voice hushed. "Mr. Brooks? May I bring you anything?" "Water," Ethan said. "Thank you." She hesitated. "We're honored to have you with us." Ethan met her eyes. Not unkindly. "Just do your job," he said. "That's enough." She flushed and moved away. On the tarmac, Melissa got back to her feet. She limped. One hand hovered near her knee as she dragged another bag toward the belt. A ramp agent shouted instructions she couldn't hear from the cabin, his gestures sharp, impatient. She nodded too fast, eager, desperate to get it right. The window tint deepened as the aircraft rolled back. The jet's shadow slid across concrete, swallowing her for a moment before moving on. When it cleared, Melissa stood alone, wet and shivering, watching the plane that had been her kingdom drift away without her. Jonathan exhaled. "Do you feel sorry for her?" Ethan took the water, unscrewed the cap, and drank. He thought of conference rooms that went quiet when he walked in. He thought of the first investor who asked if he was in the wrong building. He thought of hands on his shoulder in places that weren't airports. "No," he said, "because if you hadn't shown up, I'd be in a room explaining myself to people who already decided who I was." Jonathan nodded slowly. "The video is already moving," he said. "I checked before we closed the door." Ethan didn't ask where. He didn't need to. He'd seen the phones. He'd felt the shift when the crowd realized it wasn't just a scene. It was a mirror. The plane turned. Brakes released. The runway stretched ahead, slick and grey. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom, measured and calm. "We are number 1 for departure. Next stop, New York." The aircraft surged forward. Acceleration pressed Ethan into the seat. The world outside blurred into streaks of light and snow. The wheels left the ground, and gravity loosened its grip. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Not in relief, in focus. He saw a boardroom in his mind, polished wood, glass walls, faces that would be polite and sharp and calculating. He saw a contract on a table, thick and waiting. He saw a line item labeled Culture, small and ignored, and he imagined dragging it to the center of the page. When he opened his eyes, Manhattan was still hours away, but the work had already begun. Jonathan shifted in his seat. "I'll make it right," he said. "Not just with statements." "I know," Ethan replied. "Because now you have to." Jonathan smiled thinly. "You never ask small." "I never accept small," Ethan said. Outside, clouds swallowed the city. The cabin settled into its quiet hum. Somewhere behind them, a child laughed. A glass clinked. Life went on, even as consequences took shape. Down below, on a tarmac growing colder by the minute, Melissa Carter loaded another bag. Her hands were numb now. Her breath came in short bursts. She paused, looked up at the sky, and squinted against the sleet. For a heartbeat, she seemed to understand that this wasn't just punishment. It was a message, one she couldn't unread. The plane climbed, and the distance between who she thought she was and what she had done widened until it could no longer be crossed. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber as the plane leveled off, and the quiet that followed was not peace but anticipation. Ethan opened his laptop on the tray table, the worn duffel still tucked beneath his feet like an anchor. The screen glowed to life, illuminating his face in pale blue. He didn't rush. He never did. Rushing made mistakes louder. He pulled up a document titled Horizon Cargo Agreement Final Draft and scrolled without reading, eyes drifting instead to the notifications stacking in the corner of his screen. They were already multiplying. A text from his chief counsel came in first, then another from operations, then a message from a partner on the West Coast who never texted unless something was burning. Jonathan leaned across the aisle, voice low. "It's everywhere now." Ethan didn't look up. "How many views?" Jonathan checked his phone. "North of 2 million, and climbing." Ethan nodded once, as if acknowledging a weather report. 2 million wasn't outrage yet. It was ignition. Behind them, in the quiet rows of first class, people whispered. Some pretended not to stare. Others stared openly. The kind of attention that feels like heat on skin. Ethan had learned years ago how to let it pass through him without sticking. A flight attendant paused nearby, pretending to adjust a seatbelt sign. Her hands shook. She had seen the video too. He could tell. Everyone had. Ethan finally scrolled to the top of his inbox. The subject lines told the story without needing to open a single message. Discrimination at Gate K. 12. Apex Air Incident. Going viral request for comment. Urgent. He closed the laptop gently. "This is bigger than her," Jonathan said, following his gaze. "You know that." "Yes," Ethan replied. "That's why it matters." Jonathan exhaled through his nose. "The board will want containment." "They'll get accountability," Ethan said. "Containment comes later." Jonathan studied him. "You're going to make this a condition." Ethan looked out the window again. Clouds slid past like torn cotton. "I'm going to make this a correction." In Chicago, Long after the plane had vanished into the sky, Melissa Carter sat in a break room that smelled of burnt coffee and damp fabric. Her vest lay in a heap on the floor. Her hands were red and raw, nails cracked, cuticles split. She held them under the flickering fluorescent light as if they belonged to someone else. Her phone buzzed. She flinched, then grabbed it with both hands. The screen was aflood. Gatekeeper Melissa was trending. Racist airline employee exposed. "This you?" Her face stared back at her from a dozen different angles. Some stills caught her mid-shout, mouth wide, eyes hard. Others froze her pointing finger inches from Ethan's chest. The comments were brutal. Strangers dissected her expression, her posture, her words. People she had never met spoke about her as if she were a lesson, not a person. She scrolled faster, breath shallow. Someone had found her LinkedIn. 15 years of employment history laid bare, now weaponized. Her profile picture, once professional and composed, looked smug in hindsight. She closed the app, reopened it, as if hoping it would look different. It didn't. The door opened. 2 figures stepped in. One from Human Resources, one from Airport Security. Neither smiled. Melissa Carter, the HR manager said quietly, clipboard in hand. "We need to speak with you." Melissa stood too fast, chair legs screeching against tile. "I did what I was told," she said. "I followed procedure." The HR manager didn't meet her eyes. "We're past that." Back in the air, Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced down. A message from his counsel, brief and precise. "We can push for public termination with cause. Evidence supports it." Ethan typed back with his thumbs. "Do it clean. No leaks, no settlements." Jonathan watched him. "You're sure?" "Yes." Jonathan nodded slowly. "The board will push back." Ethan's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Then they'll learn." The plane cut through a patch of turbulence, a brief rattle that made glasses tremble. The cabin settled again. The quiet returned, thicker now. Ethan thought of the gate, the blue carpet, the scanner light that never turned green because someone decided it shouldn't. He thought of how easy it would have been to walk away, to rebook, to avoid the mess. He had chosen not to. In New York, the boardroom filled early. Men and women in tailored suits took their seats around the long table, murmuring to one another, eyes flicking to the screen at the far end of the room. On it, paused, was a familiar image. Melissa's face, caught mid-accusation. Ethan's stillness opposite her. Jonathan stood at the head of the table, hands flat on the wood. "We'll begin," he said. He didn't need to explain why. The video played, sound on, no commentary. No edits, just the raw footage, ugly and undeniable. When it ended, no one spoke. Finally, a man near the window cleared his throat. "This is unfortunate." Ethan leaned forward. "Unfortunate is a delayed flight," he said evenly. "This is systemic." Eyes turned to him, some curious, some defensive. "You employ people who believe appearance determines belonging," Ethan continued. "That belief was acted on, publicly, with your logo behind it. That is not a single employee problem." Jonathan watched the room carefully. He could feel the shift, numbers being weighed, risks calculated. "What do you want?" the man asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Termination for cause. Public. No severance. A statement that names discrimination explicitly. And a funded training program with oversight not controlled by you." The room stiffened. "That's extreme," someone said. Ethan met their gaze. So was calling security on a man with a valid ticket because he wore a hoodie. Silence. Jonathan folded his hands. "We are exposed," he said. "The stock dipped this morning. Analysts are already asking questions. And they will keep asking," Ethan replied, "until your answer is credible." Jonathan looked around the table. Slowly, heads began to nod. Back in Chicago, Melissa walked out of the terminal flanked by security, her badge already deactivated. People stared. Some whispered. One voice cut through the cold air. "That's her." She kept her head down, hands shoved into her coat sleeves. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't look. At the curb, she stopped, looked back once at the glass facade of the airport, the place where she had felt important, in control, safe. It didn't look back. In the sky above, Ethan closed his laptop and leaned back as the city lights of New York began to glow through the clouds. The plane descended, smooth and steady. He felt no triumph, only alignment. The work wasn't finished. It never was. But something had shifted, not just for him, not just for her, for the system that had mistaken silence for consent. And this time it had been answered. Morning light spilled across Manhattan like a verdict. Ethan stepped out of the black sedan and into the canyon of glass and steel, the city already moving around him with practiced indifference. Horns cut the air. A delivery truck rattled past. A man argued into a headset about numbers that sounded important and weren't. Ethan adjusted his coat and walked toward the building where decisions were made quietly, and consequences echoed loudly. Inside, the lobby smelled of polished stone and money. Security nodded him through without asking for anything more than his name. They knew it now. Everyone did. The elevator rose fast and silent. 50 floors, no music, just the soft click of numbers changing and the faint hum of cables under tension. Ethan stood with his hands folded, expression unreadable, mind already in the room waiting for him. The boardroom doors opened to a wall of windows and a long table that could seat 20 without crowding. The Hudson glinted beyond the glass. The city looked orderly from up here, manageable. It was a lie, but a comforting one. Jonathan Reed was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the forearms. He looked older than he had on the plane. Tired. Focused. "Press is outside," Jonathan said without preamble. "We're holding them." "For how long?" Ethan asked. "As long as we can." Ethan set his bag down. "Then let's not waste it." Board members filtered in, faces composed, eyes sharp. Eyes. Some nodded to Ethan. Others avoided his gaze. They took their seats. Tablets lit up. Papers slid into place. The machinery of governance whirred to life. Jonathan stood. "Before we discuss projections, we need to address the incident." No one pretended not to know which one. The screen lit up. Not the video this time, a statement draft, clean language, careful phrasing, apologies without ownership. Ethan read it once, then again. He closed his eyes briefly. No, he said. A few heads snapped up. This doesn't say anything, Ethan continued. It hides behind words. It acknowledges, someone began. It evades, Ethan cut in. His voice was calm. That made it sharper. You want this to go away. It won't. Not like this. A woman near the end of the table leaned forward. What exactly are you asking for? Ethan met her gaze. Truth. In plain language. Name what happened. Name why. Jonathan nodded. We can do that. And the employee, another board member asked. Jonathan didn't answer. He looked at Ethan. Terminated for gross misconduct, Ethan said. Effective immediately. Public record. A murmur rippled. Calculations flickered behind eyes. She'll sue, someone said. Let her, Ethan replied. Discovery will not be kind. Jonathan inhaled slowly. There's more, he said. Ethan turned back to the table. There always is. Jonathan tapped his tablet. Another document appeared. Internal audit. Red flags highlighted. Our preliminary review found additional deviations from protocol, Jonathan said. Priority boarding exceptions. Selective enforcement. Ethan's jaw tightened. Pattern? Yes, Jonathan said, and it complicates her claim. A pause. Then the man by the window spoke again. What are the conditions? Ethan didn't smile. $10 million, he said. Dedicated to training and oversight. Independent. Annual reporting. That's, someone started. Less than the cost of not doing it, Ethan said. And it comes with my signature on the cargo agreement. The room went quiet. Jonathan watched the nods spread, reluctant but real. Agreed, he said. Back in Chicago, Melissa Carter sat in a small room with gray walls and a clock that ticked too loudly. Her coat lay across her lap. Her hands were wrapped in paper towels, stained faintly pink where skin had split. The HR manager read from a document without looking up. Your employment is terminated for gross misconduct, discriminatory behavior, and violation of federal boarding protocols. Melissa shook her head, tears streaking down her face. I did the bags, she said. They told me the decision was made in New York, the manager said. Effective immediately. What about severance? Melissa asked, voice breaking. There is none. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't reach for it. Security will escort you out, the manager continued. If you return to the terminal, you will be trespassed. Melissa stood on unsteady legs. This isn't fair. The manager finally looked at her. Neither was what you did. 2 officers waited outside. They didn't touch her. They didn't need to. In New York, the press release went live. 0 tolerance for discrimination. Employee terminated. Immediate corrective action. Cameras flashed in the lobby. Questions flew. Jonathan read the statement once, twice, then handed the microphone to someone else. He watched from the side as the words landed, as the story shifted from spectacle to consequence. Ethan stood back, arms folded, eyes on the crowd. He felt the weight of it now. The reach, the ripple. He knew this would be dissected, debated, diluted by some, amplified by others. That was fine. A reporter pushed forward. "Mr. Brooks," she called, "why make this public?" Ethan stepped to the microphone. "Because silence teaches the wrong lesson," he said, "and because the next person standing at a gate deserves better." The room went still. He stepped back. The questions resumed without him. Later, as the building emptied and the city swallowed the day, Ethan stood alone by the window. He watched the river carry reflections of lights that would never touch the water. He thought of the blue carpet, the scanner, the red tag that changed everything. His phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan. "It's done," Ethan replied with a single word. "Good." Outside, traffic flowed. Somewhere, another gate filled with people and assumptions and small moments that mattered more than anyone wanted to admit. Ethan turned away from the glass. There was more work to do. The news cycle didn't sleep. By the time evening settled over the city, Ethan's name was no longer attached only to contracts and patents. It sat beside words like discrimination, accountability, and reform. Panels debated him. Commentators argued about tone. Strangers speculated about motive. None of them had been at the gate. None of them had heard the first sentence spoken to him that morning. Ethan sat in a quiet restaurant on the Upper West Side, jacket draped over the back of his chair, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. The place catered to regulars who valued discretion. No phones raised, no whispers, just low conversation and the clink of cutlery. Across from him sat Claire Morrison, his long-time advisor. Early 60s, sharp eyes. No patience for nonsense. She had watched his career grow from a folding table and a borrowed laptop to this. "You made enemies today," she said calmly. Ethan nodded. "I know." "You also made expectations," she added. "Those are harder." "I know that, too." Claire studied him. "You're not done." "No," Ethan said. "I can't be." He thought of the messages he hadn't opened yet. Hundreds of them. Some angry, some grateful, some terrifyingly sincere. Stories from people who had been stopped, questioned, humiliated in ways that never made the news because there was no camera, no executive, no ending anyone wanted to watch. Claire broke the silence. "You could step back now. Let the company handle the rest." Ethan looked out the window at the slow river of headlights. That would teach them how to wait me out. Claire smiled thinly. "So what's next?" Ethan finally took a sip of the tea. "Follow through." The next morning, internal memos rolled out across Apex Air. Mandatory retraining, revised protocols, clear language. No discretion where discretion had been abused. Managers were required to sign acknowledgements. So were gate leads. So were supervisors who had never stood at a podium but benefited from those who did. At a smaller airport outside St. Louis, a gate agent read the memo twice, then scanned a boarding pass she might have dismissed the week before. At a regional hub in Arizona, a supervisor quietly reminded a trainee to scan first, judge never. The changes were small, procedural, unremarkable. That was the point. In Chicago, Melissa Carter woke to the sound of her phone vibrating on a bare nightstand. She had slept on the couch. Her uniform lay folded nearby, as if still useful. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment before reaching for the device. More messages, some cruel, some gleeful, some threatening. A few from people she recognized, none from anyone who mattered anymore. She sat up slowly, joints aching. Her hands were still swollen. She turned them over, noticing how different they looked without polish, raw, ordinary. Her phone chimed again. A notification from the airline's official account. The press conference clip. Jonathan Reed's measured apology. The words, "zero tolerance." The confirmation of her termination. Her name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. Melissa dropped the phone onto the couch and pressed her palms into her eyes. Images replayed without permission. The blue carpet. The hoodie. The certainty she had felt. The way it had cracked all at once. She hadn't woken up planning to ruin her life. She had woken up planning to do her job the way she always had. That thought hurt more than anything else. In New York, Ethan walked into another meeting. This one quieter, smaller. Advocacy groups, legal experts, people who had spent years fighting battles without headlines. They listened more than they spoke. "We don't need you to be a savior," one of them said. "We need you to stay." Ethan nodded. "I can do that." They talked about metrics, about enforcement, about how training failed when consequences didn't follow. The conversation was dense, necessary, not cinematic. Ethan welcomed that. Afterward, as he stepped back into the street, a young man approached him hesitantly. Late 20s, nervous smile, phone clutched too tightly. "Mr. Brooks?" he asked. Ethan stopped. "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you," the man said. "They stopped me once, too. Different airport. Same look." Ethan didn't rush him. "They scanned my ticket after," the man continued. "But it stayed with me. What you did, it mattered." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder, brief and grounding. "Keep flying," he said. "That matters too." The man walked away lighter than he had arrived. That night, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, city humming below. He opened the last unread message in his inbox. It was from a junior engineer on his team, someone he barely knew. "I watched the video. I didn't know this could happen at your level. It scares me. But it also makes me feel less crazy." Ethan leaned back in his chair. It had been easy once to believe success insulated you. That money, titles, access built a wall thick enough to stop old assumptions. The gate had reminded him how thin that wall really was. He closed his laptop and stood, walking to the window. Somewhere out there, another person was standing in another line, being measured by someone else's imagination. He couldn't be everywhere, but he could refuse to disappear. The story would move on soon. Something always replaced the last outrage. Ethan knew that. But systems remembered pressure, companies remembered risk, and people, when given language and example, sometimes remembered their own worth. He turned away from the glass. Tomorrow, there would be another meeting, another contract, another opportunity to insist on something better. For now, that was enough. The lawsuit lasted less than a week. Melissa's attorney filed it on a Monday morning, loud and confident, alleging wrongful termination, emotional distress, and reputational damage. By Wednesday afternoon, it was already collapsing under its own weight. Discovery moved faster than she expected, faster than anyone warned her. Emails surfaced, internal notes, boarding logs, time-stamped exceptions, patterns. At 9:47 in the morning, 4 days before the incident, Melissa had manually overridden a priority flag for a passenger traveling on a non-eligible pass. At 10:12 the same day, another override. No documentation, no justification. Just a click and a quiet sense of authority, exercised without question. The names jumped out immediately. Robert and Elaine Whitman, the same couple she had ushered past Ethan without hesitation, the same smiles, the same entitlement. Their status had expired 4 years earlier. They were flying on buddy passes. By noon, Melissa's attorney stopped returning calls. In New York, Ethan sat at the long conference table as the findings were laid out, one by one, without commentary. Jonathan Reed listened with his hands folded, eyes fixed on the screen. No one spoke until the last slide disappeared. So Ethan said quietly, "She broke protocol for them, because they looked right." Jonathan closed his eyes. "Yes. And blocked me because I didn't." "Yes." The room absorbed it. Not shock. Confirmation. Ethan leaned back. "That ends it." Jonathan nodded. "Her claim won't survive this." "It shouldn't," Ethan replied. "Neither should the ambiguity." The decision was made within the hour. A supplemental statement was drafted. Clearer, sharper. It named the violations. It named favoritism. It named discrimination without hiding behind process language. When it went live, the reaction was immediate. The story shifted. It wasn't just about a gate agent anymore. It was about how rules bent for some people and hardened against others. It was about who benefited from the bend. The Whitmans issued a brief apology through a publicist. It mentioned misunderstanding. It mentioned confusion. It mentioned nothing of responsibility. The internet did the rest. In Chicago, Melissa sat at her kitchen table, staring at the same email she had opened a dozen times already. Her attorney's final message was short. "We're withdrawing. I'm sorry." She set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter if she moved too fast. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. A car door slammed. Ordinary sounds that now felt distant, unreal. She had believed rules were weapons. She had believed knowing how to use them made her safe. She had been wrong. In New York, the training sessions began. Not performative videos, not check-the-box seminars, real scenarios, real consequences. Gate agents were asked to walk through situations with no visual cues, no assumptions. Scan first. Decide never. Supervisors were instructed to intervene immediately when discretion drifted into judgment. Ethan attended the first session unannounced. He stood at the back of the room, hands in his pockets, listening. Some recognized him. Others didn't. He preferred it that way. A young agent raised her hand. What if the system flags something but the passenger looks wrong? The facilitator didn't hesitate. The system doesn't see faces. You don't either. You scan, you verify. That's it. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Afterward, the facilitator approached him. "We're rewriting habits," she said. "That takes time." "I know," Ethan replied. "Just don't stop when it gets quiet." Quiet came faster than expected. By the end of the month, the cameras moved on. Another scandal replaced the last one. Another outrage took its place in the feed. Stock stabilized. Analysts found new questions to ask. But inside Apex Air, the changes stuck. Overrides dropped by 70%. Complaints followed a different pattern. More documentation. Less discretion. Fewer stories whispered in break rooms. Ethan watched the data without celebrating. One afternoon, as he walked through the terminal on his way to another flight, he passed gate K-12. The blue carpet was still there. The podium looked the same. A different agent stood behind it, younger, nervous, focused. A man in a sweatshirt approached, phone in hand. The agent didn't look up. She scanned. The light turned green. "Welcome aboard," she said. Ethan kept walking. Later that evening, he received an email forwarded by Jonathan. A resignation letter from a regional supervisor who had quietly enabled discretionary abuses for years. It cited personal reasons. It cited reflection. Ethan deleted it after reading. The system would absorb it. That night, he found himself thinking about Melissa again, not with anger, but with clarity. He imagined her waking up every morning, replaying the moment she chose certainty over curiosity. He imagined the slow realization that power borrowed from a uniform evaporates the moment the uniform is gone. He did not wish her harm. He wished she had scanned the ticket. At dawn, he stood on his balcony, watching the city stretch awake. The river caught the light. Traffic resumed its steady pulse. Somewhere, planes lifted off and landed on schedule, carrying people with stories no one else would ever hear. Ethan checked his calendar. Another board meeting. Another contract review. Another chance to insist on language that mattered. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "You did something real. Don't let it turn you into a symbol," Ethan typed back. "I'm not interested in symbols, only systems." He slipped the phone into his pocket and turned back toward the apartment, the city already moving without him. The work wasn't dramatic anymore. That was how he knew it was working. The call came late, the kind that arrives after the noise has faded and the consequences have settled into place. Ethan was in his study, sleeves rolled, the city below his window reduced to a grid of light and motion. The room was quiet except for the soft tick of a clock he'd owned since graduate school. He let the phone ring twice before answering. "It's done," Jonathan Reed said on the other end. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Finality. Human resources completed the separation this afternoon. No appeal, no reconsideration. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Not in relief, in acknowledgement. "Thank you for calling," he said. "There's one more thing," Jonathan added. "We pulled the Whitmans' full travel history, like you asked." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "And?" "They haven't qualified for priority boarding in 4 years," Jonathan said. Every exception they received was manual. No system flags, no justification notes. It was favoritism, pure and simple. Ethan let out a slow breath. That confirms it. It also means any claim she brings dies immediately, Jonathan said. She violated federal boarding protocol by allowing ineligible passengers through a restricted lane. There was a pause. Jonathan hesitated. I should have seen this sooner. Ethan opened his eyes. Most people don't, he said, until it's inconvenient not to. After the call ended, Ethan remained where he was, phone still warm in his hand. The clock ticked. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. He imagined Melissa Carter, sitting somewhere, very still, realizing that even the last defense she might have clung to had dissolved. Not just fired, disproven. The next morning, the confirmation went out. No press conference, no spectacle. A single line added to the previous statement, precise and devastating. The employee in question was terminated for gross misconduct, discriminatory behavior, and violation of federal boarding regulations. No severance, no benefits, no reference. The language mattered. By noon, analysts had updated their notes. By mid-afternoon, the stock ticked up. The market didn't care about morality. It cared about clarity. Ethan arrived at the boardroom just before 9. The same room, the same table, different air. People sat straighter now. They watched him more carefully. Not with fear, with recalibration. Arthur Langley, the board chair, cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks, he said, before we proceed, I want to state for the record that the board accepts your conditions in full. Ethan nodded once. The training fund is approved, Arthur continued. Oversight structure included. Annual audits, public reporting. Good, Ethan said. And the cargo agreement, Arthur added, sliding the folder forward. We're ready. Ethan stood. He buttoned his jacket slowly, deliberately, the way he did when he wanted to feel the weight of a moment. He walked to the window first, not the table, looked out at the river, the city already busy with its own concerns. When he turned back, the room was waiting. He signed. The pen moved smoothly across the page. One signature, then another. The final stroke lingered half a second longer than necessary. It was done. As the papers were collected and hands were shaken, Ethan felt none of the rush people expected at moments like this. No victory, no triumph. Just the quiet sense of a door closing exactly when it should. Across the country, in a small apartment near the outskirts of Chicago, Melissa Carter packed a box, not all at once, slowly, one item at a time. Her old name badge went in first, then the spare blazer she'd kept folded just in case, training manuals she no longer needed, a framed certificate for 15 years of service that now felt like a joke someone else had written. Her phone lay face down on the counter. She hadn't turned it on since the final notice came through. She already knew what it would say. She paused with a pen in her hand, staring at the Airline logo printed on it. The weight of it, the identity it had given her, the authority she had wrapped around herself so tightly, she'd forgotten it wasn't hers. She snapped it in half and dropped both pieces into the box. Outside, a bus passed. Someone laughed. The world kept moving. Back in New York, Ethan left the building alone. No entourage, no cameras, just the driver waiting at the curb, door open, city reflected in the polished black paint. Ethan slid into the back seat and gave a single direction. Teterboro. The driver nodded and pulled into traffic. As the car moved, Ethan checked his phone. A message from Claire waited at the top of the screen. "It's complete. How do you feel?" Ethan thought for a moment before replying. "Clear." The car merged onto the highway. Planes crossed the sky above, their contrails thin and temporary. Somewhere, a gate agent scanned a ticket without looking at the person holding it. Somewhere else, someone was being judged without ever knowing why. Ethan watched the city recede, not with satisfaction, but with resolve. The lesson had been delivered. The system had been forced to listen. Not because of anger, not because of spectacle. Because the truth had been documented, signed, and enforced. That was the kind of justice that lasted. The car continued forward, carrying him toward the next responsibility, the next decision that would test whether change was real or merely announced. Ethan didn't look back. There was nothing left to prove. The hangar at Teterboro was quiet in the way only private airports ever were, insulated from urgency, sealed from spectacle. Ethan stepped out onto the concrete as the Escalade rolled away, the cold air sharp against his face. His jet waited under soft white lights, matte grey, unmarked, purposeful. No logos, no statements, just machinery built to move forward. A technician nodded as Ethan passed. Another checked a clipboard. Everything worked because people did their jobs without deciding who deserved what. Ethan paused at the base of the stairs and looked back once, not at the car, not at the city, but at the sky itself. Planes crossed it constantly, thousands every day, each one carrying its own version of the same quiet test. Who belongs? Who decides? Who gets stopped? Inside the cabin, the door sealed with a muted hiss. The engines began their low, steady whine. Ethan took his seat, placed his laptop on the table in front of him, and opened it without ceremony. New contracts, new deadlines, new rooms where power would be tested not by volume, but by pressure. As the jet lifted, New York fell away beneath him, shrinking into geometry and light. The city didn't care who won today. It never did. It only remembered what changed tomorrow. Ethan thought briefly of the gate at O'Hare, the blue carpet, the scanner, the moment where everything could have ended quietly if one person had chosen curiosity over certainty. He thought of how small the action had been and how large the consequences became. That was always the truth no one wanted to admit. Systems weren't broken by dramatic villains. They were bent by ordinary people making ordinary choices over and over again until those choices hardened into policy. The jet leveled off. Ethan typed. Not statements, not speeches, procedures, language, safeguards, work that would never trend, work that would never be filmed, work that would quietly outlast the noise. Below him, somewhere between cities, another gate agent scanned another ticket. The light turned green. A passenger walked through without thinking twice about whether they belonged. That was the real ending. Not applause, not punishment, alignment. If this story followed you longer than you expected, press like before you go. If you want more stories where power is tested and systems are forced to answer, subscribe and stay with us. And if you have something to say, leave a comment with these 3 words. Stay sharp, always.